Hey folks, Michael Mann from Michael Mann Security Services. Welcome to Terrorism Prevention for Security. I think this is webinar 17, Scott? 18, something like that? All right, before we get started, contact information, michaelmannsecurityservices.com. So you can get us on the web. You can call Scott anytime. He loves to answer the phone live, 606-1006. You can email us at scottm, S-C-O-T-T-M, at michaelmannsecurityservices.com. Or, of course, you can always go to Facebook at Safe with Man and get us there anytime. Unless it's 2 a.m., we'll probably answer pretty quickly, okay? Both of us only sleep about 4 hours a night. All right. Expectations, just real quick before we get started. So we've got folks in the audience. So you guys that have tuned in, that are watching us virtually, so wherever you're at, thanks for joining us. But just so you know, so we have people here at Lighthouse Christian that are watching the presentation, and then we also have you folks. So here's some things that are going to happen. You might see me move around, and so if you're watching us from some other place, understand I'm not dodging trying to get out of the camera. There are people here asking questions, or they may ask me to do something, and so if I move off screen for just a second, I'll be right back. I'm probably going to pick something up to show something. All right. There. Okay. Other issues, I'm going to do a safety brief here in just a sec for the folks that are here, so you guys will just have to sit through that. Length of presentation, initially what we did is we set this up to just be like a physical presentation, and then because it just the request, I guess, from folks on Facebook, they asked for us to live stream it, and so we set this for 2 hours, but that's because you folks that are here, you guys are going to get some prizes and some cool stuff at the end of this, and so for the folks online, it'll probably be an hour, a little bit more, and then for you guys, it'll be obviously be longer. Once we shut down off the live feed, then we'll get to the stuff that we promised you. Okay, so online an hour 10 minutes. For you guys, probably an hour and a half. Okay, breaks. I don't think we'll need to get to that, but if we get to the hour mark and we've still got a while to go, we'll take a 10-minute break. So folks online, you're watching, I'll let you know. Hey, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Will we come off screen? Okay, so we'll put a slide up and say, hey, come back in 10 minutes, okay? So if we get to that, we may go directly through this if we don't get any questions. So what I try to do is I want every security professional, every protector that's watching us, wherever you're at, Mexico, Nigeria, Iowa, Arkansas, wherever. This is some general information about prevention, and so I don't get into classification of groups. We don't do that here. But it's information that you're going to be able to use today for things that are going on specifically today right here in the United States and some of the violence that we're seeing. So there'll be some general stuff in here for some of you folks who probably hadn't heard some of this before, but just understand, don't get in classification of groups. It's a lot of general information about characteristics, threats, that kind of stuff. Questions. Folks, you guys in the audience, you guys have a question, raise your hand. If I don't see you, Scott will. I'll stop. So folks that are watching us virtually, you might see me stop, and I'm listening. You may not hear, but when someone does ask me a question, I'll repeat that question so you guys can hear it, and then I'll give an answer, and that way everybody that's watching us will get the benefit of hearing the question and then, of course, getting an answer, because it may be a question that you guys have, okay? Safety brief for the folks that are here. Exits. 3 exits or 4 exits behind you. Fastest one out of here is right there. It takes us right back to the parking lot. If there's an emergency, I'm the first one out of here. I'm going to run right past them. If you'll just follow me, we'll get out in the parking lot. Okay? Medical emergencies, we're going to call 911 if it's something we can't handle. If you're having a medical problem, let us know, and we'll stop presentation, deal with that. Alarms, no drills or exercises, right, Scott? So no planned drills or exercises for Lighthouse Christian School. So what that means, if we hear an alarm, probably going to be a fire alarm, it's real. We'll go out that exit, okay? Folks, if we have a fire alarm go off, I'll let you know what it is. You'll probably hear it. We'll stop the presentation. We're not firefighters, so we may just have to stop in general, and then we'll try to come back if it's not an actual fire, and we'll let you guys know through email. Assembly points, guys, probably no need for it, but again, through that exit, we'll just assemble out in the parking lot, wait for help. You guys know where the restrooms are, straight behind us. At any time, folks that are here, please feel free to go back and use the restroom any time. And then if you want to, just watch the light down here. It's hot. I'm going to get a suntan before this is over with. Just don't come up in front of here. Plenty of water, soda, cookies, snacks. For you guys that could not, that couldn't be here, sorry. It's homemade cookies, and I stayed up all night baking homemade pretzels and all kinds of stuff. So you guys enjoy it, okay? All right. Agenda, here's what we're going to talk about. So this is what we'll kind of follow. And, I may jump around, especially if there's questions, but in general, we're going to just talk about an overview of the threat to the private sector, what that means for you guys, what you're seeing today, and some stuff from the past. We're going to talk about requirements for an attack. So what does that mean? I help you recognize what that means. If you guys have been watching us over the last 16, 17 weeks, some of the stuff you've heard before, we just probably put it in a church context. Here it's general for security professionals, so preventative measures. We'll get into preventative methods, what that means, kind of a step-by-step process, very specifically for us if we're on post or we're looking. Personal response kits, I'll spend just a little bit of time of, if you're a protector, like what you probably should be carrying on you at all times, all right? That's not a big backpack, because we all can't do that. So just some like basic stuff that you might want to have with you at all times. And here's the cool thing about anti-terrorism, or what we do as protectors. Whatever it is that we're doing full-time, we ought to be doing in our personal time too. And so when we're out with families, friends, whoever, even people we don't like, we should have this equipment with us. And the reason for that is because we never know when an emergency is going to happen or take place. Okay? And then we'll get into that anti-terrorism strategy for your client, just some general things that you guys can write down and maybe remember that you guys can use if you're trying to protect somebody, a facility, whatever. Any questions whatsoever from the audience? Anything from our folks online, Scott? Nope? Okay. All right. Okay. I want you to, first video, so 1984, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, there's an assassination attempt on her life from the Irish Republican Army, the adversary, so nationalist terrorist group. Everybody remembers who the IRA is pretty much. And so I want you to watch this video, and then I'm going to talk about how this applies to us. You know, this happened many years ago, but it's applicable today, and then we'll go to the next slide and talk about why it's applicable and really what all this means. All right?
Than light, and that respect was reinforced for many, including opponents, following the bombing of the Brighton Hotel in which she and the cabinet were staying for the 1984 party conference. 5 were killed in the attack, which was claimed by the outlawed IRA organization. The Prime Minister herself only narrowly escaped injury. Her bathroom was wrecked by the blast, but in the immediate aftermath of the explosion, she remained sufficiently collected to talk to newsmen.
You hear about these atrocities, these bombs. You don't expect them to happen to you. But life must go on, as usual.
And your conference will go on.
Conference will go on. The conference, all right, John, the conference will go on, as usual.
But no single event enhanced her personal standing in the eyes of the British electorate more than the Falklands War.
So they attempted to kill Margaret Thatcher. They were unsuccessful. And here's what the IRA had to say to the British government. Today, we were unlucky. This is coming from the IRA. But remember, we have to be lucky once. You will have to be lucky always. And so as really security, our job is not to be lucky. Luck is success or failure brought by chance rather than one's own actions. So I don't want luck. What I want to do is I don't want to even get involved with it. And what that means is we have to focus on a strategy of prevention, and that's where we're going to get into in this. I don't want to depend on luck. I want to stop something from happening before it occurs. And that's what anti-terrorism is all about. That's what protection, physical protection, is all about today. What it's always been about is stopping that threat before it becomes a problem for the asset that we're trying to protect. Okay? So, general definition. So I've been studying terrorism now I've been involved in anti-terrorism operations now for 32 plus years. And I know I look a lot younger because I know it's probably all my good living and my I'm just, guilt-free conscious and all that kind of stuff. So it makes me look like I'm 30. And so, but general definition real quick, and then I'm going to go into something else. So general definition of terrorism, the use of threat of violence to further a political, social, or religious goal. And so that's a very broad definition for terrorism. So you can look at that today and go, well, my goodness, that fits under a whole lot of categories, and we could say a lot of folks are committing terrorist activity today. Take that how you want to, but if you don't like that definition, here's what I would say. It's just intended violence. That's all it is. It's behavior that involves the use of physical force to injure or kill someone, willful damage, or destruction of property. So when we talk about violence, intended violence, and we'll get into it, it's planned, it's premeditated, There's nothing emotional behind it, and we'll get into what that means very specifically for terrorism. So, again, very general definition for terrorism. Some people may look at that and say that's too broad. Here's what it is. When we start talking about political, social, or religious goals, it's violence to meet those goals. Okay? So just an overview of when we start to talk about tactics, when we start to understand, and this is going to apply when we get to your prevention strategies for your customers or for your clients. So, throughout the years, you guys have been keeping up with this. Number one, assassination. So terrorists conduct assassinations. That's part of the tactics or part of what they actually do. Use of explosives to harm the public, so improvised explosive devices, kidnappings, armed attacks, hijackings, and this is not anything new. We didn't just plug this in here today or last month. Civil unrest very specifically for the purpose of destruction of property and to harm persons. So civil unrest is also an act of terrorism, especially if it causes harm or willful destruction of property, and it is to further some sort of religious, political, or social goal. That is terrorism. And again, if we don't like that definition of terrorism, we can always go back and say, look, it's intended violence. All right? So what you're going to see, this is an example of an armed attack. If you guys watch some of our, when we talk about faith-based protection methods, you probably heard about this. So this is an armed attack, or you've watched this. This is the actual attack itself. Let me kind of walk you through this, and then I'm going to let you see the video of the attack. So when we start to talk about social, political, religious goals, this was basically a social goal. Floyd Lee Corkins was a pro-LGBTQ person. He decided that he wanted to attack, because of social stance, he wanted to attack a ministry that was against gay marriage. This happened back in 2012. And so just the process very quickly, before he actually started planning for the attack, he decided it was going to be an armed attack. So when we talk about tactics, we go back to assassinations, use of explosive, armed attacks. That's what this was. So this is what he hoped it would be. And so he actually decided, well before the attack, it was going to be an armed attack. What he wanted to do was blow up a ministry. He wanted to, through the use of an IED or improvised explosive device, he wanted to blow up something. And then as he started looking into and researching the actual use of explosives, because he's probably, pretty smart guy, he just figured out, you know what, that might be a self-correcting error. If I do something really stupid, then I'm not going to get to what I want to get to. So let's conduct an armed attack. Now, he had no experience with firearms whatsoever. Okay, so he decides prior to the planning he is going to conduct an armed terrorist attack against a ministry. He does not know what ministry yet. So on August the 7th, the planning starts. So what he does, he gets online, he starts looking for firearms because he decides he doesn't want to try to build a bomb at home, because if he makes a mistake, he may not survive it. And so what he does is he gets online. He lives just outside of D.C., or he lived just outside of D.C., and so what he does, he finds a gun store in Chantilly, Virginia, starts looking for guns, finds a pistol that he wants. The next day goes or the same day on the 7th, gets online, starts the planning process to purchase the gun, so he figures out how to get to this gun store. The next day goes to the gun store, looks at the gun, goes back home after getting a price on it. While he's there asking about the gun, very specifically, they say, hey, look, you've never bought a gun before. Because you're a first-time buyer, you also, in the price, get training with the weapon, so we're going to show you how to use it. He's like, oh, great. So rehearsal, planning, everything's happening right there. All right, so he decided what kind of a terrorist attack to conduct, and that based on social goals, and so that was an armed attack. Gets online, finds the gun, goes to the gun store, figures out they're going to help him plan and rehearse for the attack. Next day goes back, purchases the guns, gets online, starts looking very specifically for ministries that have obviously a stance against gay marriage, finds the Family Research Council, which is actually located in D.C., finds a couple of other ministries, and after a process of elimination decides he's going to attack FRC, the Family Research Council, and then he's going to go from there to some other ministries. So actually found FRC on Southern Poverty Law Center's website. So that's how he went through the planning process to conduct the attack. Prints out Google Maps, finds out where it's at, gets on a metro, goes down, actually goes to the location. So we're going to get into this. I'll tell you this is important here later on, where I'm walking you through this process. He goes to conduct surveillance. Now, surveillance is the observation, person, place, or thing for the purpose of gathering information. Anything legal about or illegal about that? Anything illegal about surveillance? No, not necessarily, not in itself. But he decides, because he's got to go through the planning process, he's going to conduct hostile surveillance, which is observation of a person, place, or thing for the purpose of conducting a successful attack. There's some very specific requirements in hostile surveillance. Goes down, he's looking very specifically. He's looking for vulnerabilities at the site, what security looks like, figures out the door's locked, can't get in. Through a ruse, gets in, says he's there to get a look for a job interview or look for somebody. The facilities person, who's also security, buzzes him in. He gets in, has a conversation with a guy, conducts his pre-attack surveillance, leaves, goes back home, gets his weapon, gets a backpack. Similar to this one, in the backpack he does, puts his SIG P229, which this is a blue gun, folks, puts a SIG P229 in a backpack. He puts 2 extra boxes of ammo inside that backpack. On the 14th, he drives down to Chick-fil-A, buys 15 Chick-fil-A sandwiches, stuffs them also in the backpack, because the idea was he was going to kill the Christians inside FRC, and after he shot them, he would rub the Chick-fil-A sandwiches actually in their faces. Next day on the 15th, goes down, gets on the Metro with his backpack, with his firearms, with the Chick-fil-A sandwiches, extra ammo. Again, through route, gets inside FRC. The guard buzzes him in. He comes inside and then conducts the attack. What you're going to see here in just a second is the video of the attack. He walks up. You'll notice he's got the backpack. And again, this will be important when we talk about your strategy later on. Okay? You're going to notice he puts the backpack down. And folks online, if you see me bend down, I'm just showing the folks in the audience the backpack. Sorry you couldn't be here. Again, missing out on the cookies and some of the other good stuff. So puts the backpack down. Is having a conversation. At some point, you're going to see him. He bends down, and what he's doing, he's opening the backpack, and he's reaching in to get the pistol to start the attack. The facility/security person understands that that is abnormal behavior and walks around to watch to see what's happening and sees it's a firearm, and they get into a confrontation. He ends up, the weapon discharges, I think, twice, hits the facilities security person twice, but the facilities person is able to subdue him and call police. Police get there, they arrest him, and he is charged and convicted of an act of terrorism against FRC. In the backpack was also directions and the name for, I think, 2 other ministries that he had planned once he left FRC, if he survived, to go attack those also. Charged and convicted with terrorism, so violence or the threat of violence against the ministry based on a social objective or a reason to commit that social objective. So here, just real quick, I want you guys to see the actual attack, because this is going to come into play. We start to talk about successful requirements and all that kind of stuff. Give it just a second. There is no sound for folks online on this video, so don't bother Scott. I can't hear anything. There's nothing here with it. Okay, so this is the security staff / facility guy. So there's Corkins. He comes up. You can see he's got his backpack around his right shoulder. He's at this point he's given a reason why he's there, but the security or the facilities guy, I think, recognizes him from the day before. So you notice he puts the backpack down, and he's messing around with the backpack. He's spending an awful lot of extra time, and so luckily the security guy goes around to see what he's doing. Okay, so he's trying to pay attention, and at that point, the pistol comes out. The facility / security guy gets into a struggle with Corkins, and at some point is, after the gun goes off a couple times, is actually able to subdue him. The police are contacted, and of course Corkins is arrested and again charged with terrorism and then convicted. Once he's arrested, the FBI interview him, and in the FBI interview, which you guys might have saw in some of our other webinars, the quick interview with Corkins, he does very plainly, and of course they knew, once he was arrested, taken into custody, they went to his house, executed a search warrant. They were able to look at his computer. They could see his history. They knew exactly where he got the information to the attack facility. But they asked him in the interview, and he was very open. He said, yep, I went to Southern Poverty Law Center. I was looking for this kind of ministry, and this is why I was looking for it, and this is the process I went through. So he was very open about what he did and why he did it. Okay, so just walking through the armed attack, what that looks like. Again, this is going to come into play here later on as we get through the presentation. So let's talk about the characteristics, and this is important for us. So there's not any act of intended violence or terrorism that is not pre-planned. And that's the good thing for the protector, for us, the security professional. Because remember, we're not, if we're not looking to prevent something, then we do have to depend on luck. We don't want to have to depend on luck. Remember, they can be unlucky, right? But they only have to be lucky once. We have to be lucky all the time. So let's take luck out of it and literally try to prevent the attack. So just characteristics. It's always planned in advance. If you're here today and you protect faith-based organizations, I will tell you a standard terrorist attack could take anywhere from a month to 3 years, the planning process. Through research, what I've done in the attacks since 2004 at faith-based organizations, it's about a week to 2 weeks. It's very, very quick. So that planning process is shortened. It's very short, even in a terrorist attack like at FRC. So if you're protecting faith-based organizations, understand that planning process, everything from target selection to actual attack execution, that time frame or that cycle is actually very, very short, a week to 2 weeks. When we start to talk about things like 9/11, that took years to plan to actually conduct and follow through. And then in general, when we start to look at terrorist attacks on large scale, again, they can take years. We start talking about faith-based organizations, if that's what you do, that planning cycle through the research I've looked at over the last, since 2004, 16 years, it's pretty short with what information that we have. Unfortunately, with faith-based organizations, especially target attacks, or terrorist attacks, active shooters, sometimes there's not a lot of information, all right? But so far what I've seen is that, or what I've read and researched, that attack cycle is very, very short. So it's not like you're going to have to be looking for something a year before. It looks like that planning cycle is short. All right? So planned in advance, the attack is designed to influence some sort of political behavior. Now, one thing that it always does when there's an attack is overreaction. So the victim or the government overreacts. So going back to what we've done, we've been in a war on terror for how long now? 20 years? Like 2001, right? Into 2001. Has there been any overreaction from the United States government based on what happened in 2001? I mean, so when we think about really what overreaction is, resources, we've changed our lives, the things that we've done to try to mitigate another terrorist attack like that. If you think about what we've done and how we've modified our lives since 2001, has there been an overreaction? I think so, and what we're going to show you in a second. Publicity. So we try to get, or the adversary tries to get an overreaction, or they try to coax somebody into overreacting. And a reason for that is to gain publicity for the mission or for what it is that they're trying to accomplish. Okay, and then it creates an environment of fear, and that's exactly, really for the last, since 2001, have people not been fearful of terrorist attacks? They have been. We've modified our lives around the mitigation that we put into place. We've modified our lives based on what happened in 2001. I'm not saying it's not necessary, but this is when we start talking about characteristics of terrorist attacks. These are some of them, and two very specifically, trying to get an overreaction and trying to change the way trying to get the victim to change the way they live their life and to live in fear. We are living in fear right now. The United States of America right now, based on a virus, is living in fear. It is some sort of a reaction. So again, a goal of terrorism is to do that. And again, I want you to look at this photo. This is, does anybody remember going to the airport before like 9/11? This is the airport now. When I look at this photo, look how busy that is. Look at all the equipment that's in place, the government employees that have to be hired and maintained, the process that you have to go through to get on a plane. Do you remember when, like, your family could go to the gate with you? Do you remember that? And now, like, if you were born after 2001 or you were a child in 2001, you don't remember that. You think this is normal. This is not normal. This is the process that we have to go through. These are the mitigation techniques, the things that we live in fear because of, the things that we have done, the way that we've changed our lives because of terrorism. And so it has absolutely worked. And I'm not saying that this is not necessary. When I look at this picture, especially when I travel, and there's not a lot of travel right now, but when I travel, and I've got TSA, I've got like the TSA Plus or whatever you call it. So it doesn't take me long to get through security. But still, when you look at the process that you have to go through just to get on an airplane, it has changed our lives drastically since 2001. And a lot of people just don't remember. This now is what the airport looks like. This is not what I remember airports in 2001 or before, prior to. Okay? So we start to talk about cause. All right, so I've got mental illness up here, but what do you guys think? We're going to get into this, but cause of terrorism, like in the audience, what do you guys think? What's the reason someone would commit a terrorist attack that you've heard or that you've studied in the past? Anybody? It'll be online also. You can jump in there. You can answer Scott. Gain credibility. Yep, for the mission, correct? For the organization. What else? So gain credibility. What else? Say again? Yeah, fundraising. Yeah, trying to gain attention to get money. Absolutely. What else? Yeah, so religio-political could be a faith-based organization or faith-based terrorist group, and so there's a motivation based on some sort of religious objective or goal. Anything else? Yeah, disenfranchised. Like, what are they trying to do? What's the purpose? Right? What are they trying to do? They're trying to do what? Belong to something, do something. Yes, sir. Trying to be heard. Yeah, they're trying to get attention. Right? So if I think about that, and again, we won't get into politics of it, but if we start to think about the Middle East, and we think about a long-term, long-standing terrorist organization, I always think of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. Yes?
Jealousy or fear of other groups?
Yeah, jealousy or fear of other groups.
The spread of fear.
Yeah, the spread of fear, absolutely. So when we think about that, I always think about, because in my terrorism studies in graduate school, I went to graduate school later in life, but terrorism studies in graduate school for me, it was like just after 9/11. And so in that study, there was a lot about the Middle East, a lot about religio-political groups, and so a lot of study about Al-Qaeda, what we knew about Al-Qaeda at the time, and then very specifically about groups that had been around, like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the PLO. And when I think about campaigns that the PLO went through for a long time, absolutely, trying to get attention, get funding.
Our good friend Perry says motivated by hatred, and Daryl says revenge, like Timothy McVeigh.
Absolutely, revenge like Timothy McVeigh, and what was it Perry said?
Good old Perry Conlon says motivated by hatred.
Yep, motivated by hatred, which, look, it's all just sin. What is violence? It's sin. It's what, unfortunately, is what makes this world go around. So when I think about that, when I think about an example, very specifically go back to a nationalist group, Irish Republican Army, and then we start to talk about like religio-political groups, we can talk about the PLO. So most of the time, or a lot of times, we think that there's mental illness involved with someone that decides that they're going to strap on explosives under a jacket, right? This is in our, by the way, anybody online, don't worry, you're not going to see the screen blow up. This is just a training aid, all right? And so who wants to put on a vest of explosives, right? Put a switch down their sleeve and walk into a building, a bar, a military location, or a police station and blow themselves up? We would think that is, someone would do that would be mentally ill. Well, believe it or not, the majority of people, like suicide bombers that actually blow themselves up, they're not mentally ill. So when we start to talk about mindset, and there's a list of things we could talk about. We just don't have time to talk about it today. This is a short presentation to get you guys, if you've not had this training or if you want additional training, to get you guys think about what it is you're doing, especially today, as you protect and you're worried about terrorism. We start to talk about what it does, what's the impact. So God-given restraint that prevents the killing of another human being, right, can be eroded through outside social and environmental influences. So the things that we hear, so in our environment, based on who we hang out with and the things that we hear and the pressures that we get, that breaks down or erodes that barrier, that thing that tells us you're not supposed to do this. Or that organization can change the way a person thinks. And so it's not mental illness. Only a small percentage of people that do this are mentally ill. It's based on environment, and it's based on a lot of other things that some of our friends online have talked about already or answered. So what I'm about to show you, it's an old video. So I studied in Israel in 2011, very specifically terrorism and how they protect critical infrastructure and some other things. So the first time I heard about this was then. So this is an older video. This is a young Palestinian woman that was the victim. I don't remember if she was in a building, but she was a victim of an attack. She was in a location where it was bombed, and she was burned over a large part of her body. And so in Israel, they allow Palestinians to come in. They allow them to work. they actually have it's like an immigration system. They have a card, and they go through these checkpoints that are very well secured. They're buried up, and as they come in, they present that card, and at the security checkpoint, the Israelis verify that's who the person is, and they go through this process, and then they're screened, and then they're allowed to go into Israel to work. And so the Israelis also treat and also help a lot of people outside of Israel that have been victims of bombings, that have been victims of terrorist attacks. And so that's what's happened with the woman that you're going to see. It's an old story. You'll see that I think they did a story on NBC. I was looking for, I've got a better video. I just could not find it. And so here was a woman that had been viciously burned through a large part of her body. The Israelis allow her to come in to get treatment in an Israeli hospital, like long-term treatment. In fact, in the beginning, she almost died. And so because of that, they're paying for it. They're allowing her to come in. So she has to come through a security checkpoint as she does that. So when we start talking about changing the way someone perceives a situation, this is what happened to this woman. So this is a Palestinian woman. She's a victim of an attack. She's burned. The Israelis bring her in. These doctors spend a large amount of time dealing with her to try to help her heal, both physically and psychologically. And they get to know her by her first name. In fact, one of the videos that, and I don't think it's on this one, but one of the doctors actually says, one of the videos I've got at home or on another laptop somewhere, says, what's odd about this story is that we pumped so much blood into her, she's almost Jewish. Like they had given her so much blood when she was first brought in, when they saved her, that like the resources they gave her, I mean, they were just talking about the amount of care they gave her. So what happened? She comes to this checkpoint quite often. They know her. And at some point, Hamas changes the way that she perceives the situation. And they talk her because she's at risk. So she's a woman that's been part of a terrorist attack. She's scarred. And so if you understand anything about that culture, being a woman is hard anyway, especially in the Middle East. And now she's physically scarred, and so she doesn't think that a man's ever going to want her. She's probably not going to get married, and so she is at risk. Okay, so what they do is they exploit that, and they change her perception of what the Israelis have done for her, and they talk her into putting on a vest and hiding it underneath her clothing because she comes through there every day, and they know her, and they try to get her to blow herself up as she gets inside this checkpoint to kill these soldiers. Now, what happened was the Israelis, through intelligence, knew that she was going to come through to do this, so they allowed her to come in and stopped her. And then you're going to see the video in just a second. I think it's somebody from NBC News is telling the story. You're going to hear some of the doctors, and you're going to see the video at the Israeli security checkpoint as they're telling her to take off some of her clothing. She does. She tries to hit the switch, okay, and it malfunctions, okay. And then she's arrested, and I'm sure she's probably still in prison for this. So when we start to talk about it, she's not mentally ill. What someone has done is they've changed the way that she actually perceives the situation that she was in with the Israelis after they've done what they've done for her.
Story of a young woman and a dream, and while this story ends well, it is a chilling tale at the same time. That's because this young woman's dream was to become a martyr by killing herself and others. At the center of this story is a young Palestinian woman. She had been given permission to come to Israel for badly needed medical treatment. At some point along the way, she developed another twisted and secret agenda. NBC's Martin Fletcher picks up the story.
Okay, I'll do it.
Until Monday, Wafa al-Bas seemed like an ordinary 21-year-old Palestinian from Gaza, on her way to an Israeli hospital scheduled for more treatment of severe burns from an accident. The doctors liked her, and she liked them.
Did you save her life?
I believe so, yes. My name is Dr. Yuval Krieger. I am in charge of the burn service at the Soroka University Medical Center in Beersheba. And I've been one of the physicians who has treated Wafa during her stay in our institution because of a severe burn which involved 45% of her body, involving the neck, the chest, the abdomen, the arms, and the legs. She actually needed 3 operations during her stay, her long stay. She stayed with us for about 6 weeks, and part of the time she spent in the intensive care unit because there was a severe danger to her life, and at some point along the way. I must say that these news has made me very uneasy and surprised, maybe a little disappointed, because I felt that we have given her the best treatment that we could without regarding, with no regard to the fact that she is not Israeli. We don't do that discrimination. We treat people as they are people, with full throttle, and use every modality that we have to improve their conditions and try to cure them. And it was surprising to hear that Wafa has come to a decision to pay us a visit with less friendly intentions.
My name is Professor Leo Rosenberg, and I'm heading the Department of Plastic Surgery and the burn unit in the Soroka University Medical Center, where Dr. Krieger is in charge of the burn service. In a certain point, when we were talking to her, we also mentioned that she's practically Jewish, because due to all the surgeries that she had to undergo, most of her blood was changed, and she got more than, I think, 15 units of blood, so practically she was living off Jewish blood. For us, any patient that is patient is a patient and will not be treated in another way. I hope that this experience will not change us. We do hope that it will change some of our neighbors.
After 6 months treating her, Dr. Yuval Krieger and the nurses even got this thank you note from Wafa's family. The care, it says, was wonderful and warm. But then
She didn't come. I marked her as one of the people who didn't show up.
it wasn't only the doctors expecting her. At the border with Gaza, soldiers had information a female suicide bomber was on the way. And then Wafa shows up with 20 pounds of bombs in her underpants. Soldiers order her to halt and undress.
There's a switch. You'll see she tries to pull it in just a second and it malfunctions. Right here. You see she's
Desperate,
praying.
Wafa
Praying
pulls a
right here.
detonator. She flinches. The moment caught in an army video camera. She expects to die, but no explosion. She tries again. Still she lives. Furious, she screams in frustration. And the army blew the bomb up safely. If Wafa al-Best had made it, this is where she would have come, the outpatients department of Soroka Hospital. 8 o'clock in the morning, normally there's about 100 patients here. So what turned Wafa into a suicide bomber, who used a doctor's appointment to try to kill the doctor?
I guess I was the target.
One explanation from Latifa, who met Wafa in the hospital. They talked daily for a month.
After her terrible burns, Wafa's fiancé left her. She felt abandoned and ugly. She cried and said, "I want to die." She said, "Someone give me a bomb."
Wafa says the bomb came from militants from Al-Aqsa brigades. At home in Gaza, her mother cries, "My child is sick," and they used her. Now Wafa's crying too. "I wanted to be a martyr, but now I want to live," she says. "Please forgive me. Don't put me in jail for life. I didn't kill anyone." Martin Fletcher, NBC.
Okay, so we have 2 questions online. Let's go to those questions real quick. Sorry, folks.
Michael, the first one is from Cecilia. She wants to know, do you consider school shootings an act of terrorism?
We have to go back to the definition, religious, political, or social goal. Yeah, so the majority of school shootings, no. Most of that is just opportunistic violence, but there has to be a religious, social, or political goal for that to happen.
And Jim asks, you had an interesting point about attacks being pre-planned. And from 2010 to 15, Al-Qaeda's Inspire magazine kept trying to urge followers to conduct opportunistic attacks. Basically, if you have your weapon, see a vulnerable target, attack it. But that never seemed to happen. As you stated, these attacks seem to be very targeted and planned out, even the unsuccessful ones. Why do you think the use of opportunistic attacks never developed?
Probably a couple reasons. What we learned about Al-Qaeda, number one, the magazines that, like Jim, that you're reading, and I think it's Jim Hinkle's, is who it is? Yep. No.
Different Jim.
All right. Number two, so the magazines that where you were reading this, that information, that type of intelligence has been intercepted by U.S. intelligence. And so I think, one, because that information's out and we're catching it, and so we're able to detect it early. And then also, when we start talking about very specifically Al-Qaeda, and even if you look at ISIS, those magazines are put out for people a lot. If you guys watched our Lone Wolf seminar or webinar, a lot of those folks are lone wolves. So that information is being put out to people that really don't have support. They're doing this by themselves, or maybe they have one or two other people assisting. So that planning process has a lot of vulnerabilities because there's not a lot of assistance. And like when we look at Floyd Lee Corkins, like he never planned anything. He went through the process. And so, again, I think we got a lot better in 2010, 2015 to catch it. And number two, again, that information is going out to people that are not spending time in Yemen or in Afghanistan in terrorist training camps. A lot of that information is going out to people that are here or close to here. And because of that, they're just not, they're not experts at it. Not saying they can't be successful, because they can. Floyd Lee Corkins would have been successful. And again, that wasn't a religio-political group or terrorist. But again, he could have been if it wasn't for someone paying attention. But I think intelligence, and I just think that information is going out to people that have not done this before. Any other questions? Okay. All right, let's get real quick the important stuff for you guys. Yes, sir. All right, so she did get released in 2011. Yep. So she's still supporting the Palestinian martyrs. Yep. So again, that change of perception based on something that happened. And if you go back, there's some other stuff about her. A lot of it has to do with her physical appearance. So when we say at risk, when we start talking about criminals and children that grow up in criminal environments, we talk about at risk things that they don't have that other people do have. She's at risk because of scarring. No one wants to be with her. Her fiance broke up with her. You heard that after the attack, after she was scarred. So she's been released, but of course back to whatever. So I'm sure she's on a list somewhere. It's going to be very difficult for her to probably get back in and do that. Okay. Any other questions? Any questions online? We missed anything? Scott? Good. All right, let's talk about what's important to you guys, and ladies, everybody that's on here, the attack requirements. So just a very short, abbreviated, you guys write this down, and if you have questions, stop me. So just real quick requirements to be successful for this. And we're kind of mixing adversary attack methodology and those requirements for successful attack to speed this up and just give you guys a general overview. Number one, they got to select a target. That's the critical step for us. Because really, if we talk about prevention, we need to do something as they go through the process of selecting the target. Now, we don't know we're going to be the target. But as protectors, it's something that we should always be doing. So if we are looked at as a target, that it impacts the motivation of that adversary to not attack our facility. We need to do something to psychologically impact them. And I'm going to tell you, we're going to go over it. A gun, the overt carrying of weapons, does not deter adversaries. I say this over and over. Cecilia asked a question about active shooters. If guns stopped attackers, we wouldn't have any school shootings. We wouldn't. There would be none. If we look at the majority of active shooter attacks in schools over the last 15 to 20 years, majority of those happen in middle schools and high schools. Where did we start putting police officers 25 years ago? In middle schools and high schools. I remember, I was a SWAT officer in Metro Nashville at the time. I remember when we put in the early to mid-90s when we started putting police officers in high schools here in Nashville. And then that grew into middle schools, and then they probably have in elementary schools now. So that element that psychologically impacts that motivation or deters them, right? So convinces the adversary that we're going to be too hard of a target to actually attack and be successful at attacking. there's something, and we're going to get into that, we need to be doing. It's a critical step for us, and it's easy. Okay? Then they have to gather information. You saw that with Corkins. He didn't have to go to the target. He gathered the majority of the information he needed online. If you guys have tuned into our other terrorism webinar, we start talking about protecting faith-based organizations. We talk about the wave. We're still in the religious wave. There's still a threat of religious terrorism to the United States of America, ongoing, and it will be for a long time. But we are also now in this technology wave. And that technology wave is the adversary is able to get online. They're able to use the internet, the resources that they have at home to learn everything that they need to know about the target and be successful. Do you guys remember the Mumbai attack in 2008? Multiple attacks on Mumbai, 3 days, took 3 days, killed, I don't know, like 300 people, injured, I think, double that amount. And those attacks were committed by 10 attackers from Pakistan who had never set foot in India. Never. They never went and looked at the target. Now, they spent 6 months training. They were at-risk youth. They were recruited by Lashkar-e-Taiba. They were trained extensively for 6 months, but they never set foot in Mumbai, ever. So the intelligence came from someone on scene for 2 years who was actually an American and who was actually at the time working as an informant for the DEA and was given intelligence to Lashkar, the terrorist organization that was actually founded by the actual founder of Al-Qaeda, and that was not bin Laden. And so was giving them information while he was an informant for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. And there were literally teenagers that were on Google Maps that were looking at the targets, giving the information about the targets to the terrorist organization. Those 10 attackers who grew up in very, very pitiful means. I mean, they grew up in very small villages where there wasn't running water, recruited, trained for 6 months, never set foot in India until the attack. And this thing went on for 72 hours. Like it was an ongoing mixture of vehicle assaults, armed attacks, use of improvised explosive devices, assassinations. You go down the list, it happened in those 72 hours before the military could actually get there and stop them. Okay? So we are in the religious phase or wave, but we're also now in a technology wave. And that technology wave gives us advantage to our adversary that they didn't have 25, 30 years ago. Okay? But they still have to come on site to look. Even if they gather information, the majority will still come and look first. So gather information. We have to be surprised as the victim. If it's not a surprise, we're going to be able to probably prevent it. Maintain control. And what that means is once they get there, they need to be able to control the situation the entire time they're on target. So what that means is they're going to control the victims, and they're going to control anybody that tries to come in to stop it, or anybody that's on site to stop it. And they have to be mobile. If I'm going to attack this location, mobility means my ability to move around. I got to get through the front door. I got to get in this door if this is the target area. I got to get in here, and I got to be able to move around. If I take any of these elements out, then it's going to be very difficult for them to be successful in conducting the attack. Okay? So, real quick to cover terrorist attack in Orlando, Florida. June 12, 2016, Omar Mateen, security guard, trained with firearms, bought weapons 2 weeks before the actual attack. Religious objective, so the use of violence to be successful in a religious objective. Claimed allegiance to ISIS, and that was his claim, or he says why he actually attacked the nightclub. It was a homosexual nightclub. Kills 49 people, wounds 53. Did purchase weapons 2 weeks before. Conducted surveillance on the Pulse nightclub and also conducted surveillance on other gay nightclubs prior to the attack. Now, we talk about guns do not prevent attacks. There was an off-duty armed police officer, and I know, or we figured, that Mateen had to see that police officer as he was conducting his hostile surveillance. That police officer was there on scene during the attack at 1:30 in the morning when it happened. Mateen gets out, gets into the club, starts shooting. The police officer, the off-duty officer that's on duty providing security, realizes he is overwhelmed. Mateen sees him, shoots back at him, overwhelms him, but that did not deter the attack from happening. Guns don't deter the attack. We do through something else that we're going to talk about. Okay? So I want you to see when we start talking about number one, choose the target. He chose his target. He gathered information. He conducted pre-attack surveillance. He was able to control the situation by use of firearms. He was mobile the entire time. He's moving around. This happened. I mean, you guys remember this attack? It took several hours because Orlando PD shows up and is a traditional law enforcement SWAT team, even though he had conducted a stronghold assault inside, which means he's inside with weapons killing people, moving around, close quarter battle tactics. When they got there, and again, we're not here to talk about the politics of police work and what happened when they got there, but traditionally, when that's going on, when they got there, some of the shooting had stopped, so they set up containment, started planning to try to get in to stop him. And while that was happening, some other killing happened. If you guys remember, there was a bunch of backlash toward Orlando PD because of that. And so he was able to get in, he was able to stay mobile and control the situation with the firearms that he had, which was an AR, and I think he had a pistol, and of course extra ammunition. Very quick news story just to go over what happened. So we start to talk about, again, element of surprise. They weren't expecting it. He gathered information. He picked the target. He was able to be mobile, and he was able to control the situation for an extended amount of time.
911 center after he set in motion the worst mass shooting in U.S. history. Omar Mateen, who killed 49 people, pledged himself to the leader of ISIS in his call and in several calls that a police negotiator made to his cell phone. Here's David Begnaud.
Oh my God, people are getting shot, dude.
Chilling, calm, and deliberate is how the FBI described Omar Mateen when he called 911 during the rampage. The FBI released the transcript of a 50-second 911 call Mateen made from inside the club nearly 30 minutes after he opened fire. Mateen, in the name of God the merciful, the beneficent. Operator, what? Praise be to God, Mateen goes on. What's your name? My name is I pledge of allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi of the Islamic State. Shortly after that 911 call, the FBI says crisis negotiators talked with Mateen 3 different times between 2:48 a.m. and 3:24. In that time, Mateen called himself an Islamic soldier and told negotiators to stop bombing Syria and Iraq, saying that's why he was out here right now. Among the lingering...
Okay. So when we, again, going through the process of conducting that successful attack, we can look at this with Corkins, or any attacker, any adversary. We start talking about terrorism, active shooters, any act of intended violence. This is what's required to be successful. Any questions so far online, Scott? Nothing? All right, just a couple things for you guys to be thinking about as protectors, some stuff to carry. Like, I don't want to have to carry a big backpack around all the time. Whatever I carry as a protector, I want to have on me all times, whether it's I'm working for someone or whether I'm inside my personal vehicle with my kids or whatever. Okay, so just some things to think about to carry, and we're going to move through this pretty quickly. Just talking about, because we get questions about, hey, look, I want to do this. Like, I want to do this every day at work, or I'm already doing this, and I haven't gotten a lot of training, and I don't know what to go buy. And look, I don't have $5,000 to buy backpacks and tourniquets and, stuff that's going to save people's lives and shoulder fire weapons that fold up. I can't do that. And so here's what I would tell you that you need. Okay, first thing is cell phone communication. And that communication, some kind of contact with the person you're protecting or that facility very specifically, and you can do that through Zello. Okay? So there are apps today on your phones that are absolutely free, walkie-talkie apps and comm apps, where you can contact anybody inside your immediate area, absolutely free. Everybody today has a smartphone, pretty much. Okay? Everybody has some sort of a smartphone. And so your smartphone is your communication device. It does a whole lot of things. All right? You can even track people with your cell phone. So you can communicate with people inside the facility. You can communicate with your client on some of these walkie-talkie or communication apps, Voxer, Zello, whatever. Suspicious activity report. You need an SAR. So if you're conducting security protection, very specifically in anti-terrorism work, you need a suspicious activity report that you can later go back and fill in, so you can report that or communicate what you saw during your shift, during your security personnel shift, whatever. You need some sort of reporting mechanism, okay? And that can be on your phone. Medical response, look, now the stuff that we've learned, or the stuff that the soldiers and the Marines and sailors and airmen learned in Iraq and Afghanistan about keeping people alive in the battlefield, like, there's more medical stuff now than there's gun stuff. Like, you can't get online without seeing some kind of tourniquet that's black with like a skull on it, or like whatever. I mean, like, it's the stuff to have, right? all you really need, I want to carry a tourniquet and something I can have in my pocket. I'll probably want to carry some sort of covering, some sort of gauze, and I'll probably want to carry some sort of something to protect me, so like a barrier. And those fold up. You can get plastic ones for $1 a piece, and probably some kind of emergency blanket. So if somebody goes into shock, I can at least try to keep them from going into shock by keeping them warm. Every bit of that you can keep in your pocket. You don't have to, you don't have to be a professional, executive protection specialist or look like the British SAS with a backpack all the time, walking around and somebody's like, well, there's the security guy. And that's okay to be overt about it. But if I want stuff to have all the time and it's with me all the time, those are things you can keep in your pocket. An illumination tool, a flashlight, you're going to use that more than you use anything else. If nothing more, when you drop M&Ms under the table and you need to look to see where they are. But you need a flashlight with you. It's part of your support equipment. A utility tool, it doesn't have to be a $200 Leatherman. Gerber makes tools now that are $39, and they have everything from scissors to knives to pliers and everything else on them. They're very inexpensive, unlike 20 years ago where you did have to spend a lot of money to get a good one. And then when we talk about weapons, whether that's handgun or intermediate weapons, you guys check your state licensing requirements. But if it's an arm post, I have the support equipment for the weapons, which includes a decent holster made for the weapon, a magazine pouch, and all that needs to be belt mounted. Just like personal equipment you can use when we start talking about anti-terrorism, this is stuff that you will respond with. This is the basic stuff that you need. And if you can't have a weapon, the last bullet there, the weapons, you can take that completely out. The other stuff, you can actually carry in your pockets with you. I've got this stuff with me all the time. So let's talk about, get into the strategy. So when we start talking about prevention strategy, the very first thing as professionals is we want to focus on threat identification. So we need to understand who the problem is, and I'll get into that here in just a second. So threat identification is the number one rule for us, and that means identifying what our problem is. I'll get into in just a second. There is no security without assessment. Without identification, there's no security. We need to know what we're trying to protect the facility or our client against. Deterrence and detection. Let me say that again, deterrence and detection. Deterrence is our ability to convince the adversary that our client or our facility is going to be too tough to attack. That is not done with guns, folks. That's done with observation. That is what detection's about, seeing something early. So you're going to have to get, now, again, I wouldn't want to open a book and read it and think that that's everything that I need to know, but understand there's professional training available through us that teaches that strategy, and it's very inexpensive. Security by design gets into what we'll get into in here in a few minutes. And that is, number one, concentric rings of protection. Number two, our physical protection system. Those things like deterrence, detection, delay, and responses always last. And then, of course, conflict avoidance. You've heard this from me before, and that's our security posture or our security mission or function does not interfere or conflict with the mission of the organization we're protecting. Okay? Overt methods of detection observation. I want to be seen. If I'm protecting someone and I'm providing a prevention and a detection methodology, or that's what I'm doing, it needs to be overt. And it doesn't mean rifle strapped across your back or a badge or uniform. It's just out practice and observation. Okay? So this is what you guys, so when we start to talk about, any questions online? Okay, one question, sorry. I'm flying through this, guys, sorry. We've got a lot left for you guys here later.
So this question is from Musab, who's actually in Abu Dhabi.
Yep.
And he's asking, can we consider an online attack from a specific group targeting government agencies as a terrorist attack?
Absolutely. Is he say cyber attack, correct? Absolutely. Sabotage, I just left it off. Sabotage and cyber attacks are terrorist attacks. Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, today, a cyber attack against a government or a large organization, I'm not going to say the consequence is the same because we can't replace him in life. We can't replace information in systems. But the consequence of a cyber attack today can be devastating. It can shut down an entire government or a large organization or company. So absolutely, yes, sir. Okay? So let's talk about our strategy. This is what you guys were waiting on, I'm sure. So number one, your client needs to understand the threat. And this is a little, so I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and I worked in the government for a long time. So it's a color or an acronym, or I can't understand it. I've got a low IQ. So I have to have an acronym to remember and a color. So remember the acronym ICE, and here's what this means. Number one, when we're trying to identify the threat or understand our threat, the client has to identify who the problem is. That has to be done through assessment. Now, I don't need to go to control risk and spend $85,000 on an assessment. That can be done locally, can be done internally, but you need to understand what your threat spectrum is. Without a threat spectrum or without an assessment, if you don't know what you're trying to defend the facility against or the facility doesn't know, then there's not security. Okay? I managed an executive protection program for about 6 months where an assessment was not done. And it was offered in the beginning, and it was not allowed. And so there were all these very overt measures that were unnecessary, and at the end of the day, it made the program ineffective. It did, because the threat was not understood. And what we were doing, the protective measures that were put in place, number one, conflicted with the mission. They didn't care because they owned it. They owned the organization. But it conflicted with it, number one. And number two, because of what we were doing, the strategy, it also made the program ineffective in some ways. So your client needs to understand what the threat is. And number one is identify, and that's through assessment. What is the threat spectrum? Number two, comprehend. Comprehension means what are the tactics and what are the capabilities of the people that we're identifying? What can they do? Threat is always based on intent, capability, and frequency or history. So I need to know what have they done in the past? Is there a history? What are their capabilities? And again, intent always comes based off of behavior, number one, and number two, what is said, or what information I can get about something they said. Then number three is evaluate. Evaluation means, really, it's a vulnerability assessment. Once we've identified who the problem is, we've conducted a comprehensive assessment to understand their capabilities, then I evaluate the program to see where our system weaknesses are. That is how we understand the threat. Without that process, the client is vulnerable. Okay? So just remember ICE. I just made that up today. I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So you guys write that down. You can pay me before you leave. Okay? Prevention versus response. Prevention is stopping something from happening. Response means actions I have to take to neutralize the threat. That means if the threat gets inside the building and I got to respond to it, I've got to pick up a pistol or a rifle or something, and I have to stop it. Here's the deal. 83% of all people shot with handguns survive. And most of the time when we're doing security work, what are we carrying if we're armed? Yeah, you're carrying a handgun. Why are we carrying handguns? What's that? Yeah, it's easy to conceal. What's another reason why we carry handguns as professionals that are licensed? Training, and because the regulatory organization a lot of times doesn't allow us to do what? We can't carry something bigger. Or what they do allow us to carry gets complicated. Like in the state of Tennessee, as a licensed armed security professional, I can carry a handgun, and if I qualify with it, I can carry a shotgun. But I'll just tell you right now, I was a shotgun guy a long time ago. And a shotgun is not what you think it is. It is a very specialized tool. It's not a weapon that you give an armed security guard and say, go walk around post with it. I much prefer them to have a carbine or rifle. But in this state, you can't do that. And so we are limited sometimes to what we have. And so if I got to respond with a pistol and 83% of people shot with handguns survive, guess what? I'm not going to be very lucky. All right? So I want to prevent something. I don't want to have to respond or neutralize to it or to neutralize it. And response always requires number one, I got to be told or I got to be notified there's a problem, number one. Number two, I got to get to the problem. And number three, I actually have to have the capability to stop the threat. I have to be able to neutralize it. And in security, in any organization, is it what the organization spends all their money on? No, the reason why we're there is they're making money off something else. They're not making money off us. Okay? On the line item, it's always in the red for us. It's always negative because they're spending money on us. We're not creating a product. We're trying to protect or safeguard the product. Okay? So a lot of times because we don't have everything that we need, if I've got to be notified there's a problem, I'm always going to be behind the power curve. So I want to prevent it. I want to stop it from happening. To do that, when we talk about adversaries, APB, any former law enforcement guys in here, remember what an APB is, all points bulletin. Here, when we're looking for adversary behavior, just quickly, we're not teaching the Israeli security concept here. We're just trying to throw stuff at you to walk out of here with an idea. Number one is the person that's aware. There's only really three people, and you guys know this. Military, law enforcement, security guys. I call them the 3 Ps. There are 3 types of people that are always aware of their surroundings. Number one, the protector, us. Number 2, the policeman, most of the time. And number 3, the predator. If it's not one of those 3, and they're in a location that's odd, and they're acting weird, and they're in executive protection, they're calling it now, these kids are calling it hypersensitivity or hyper-awareness. They're just practicing 360-degree security. It's a cool name. I get it. I'll have to start using it. But that's what it is. So who is it that's aware, that's not the protector, and that's not the police officer? Positioning is number 2. Oops, sorry about that. Oh, I'm going to disappear, break my glasses. Positioning. Where are they? Where are they positioned? You guys watch the video? Have you seen the video of the Texas attack at the church that happened back in December of last year? Did you notice where the adversary sat? Where did he sit in the church? Does anybody remember? Far left in an elevated position above where he could see, so elevated till he could see the targets. That was going to be opportunistic. Now, he picked the wrong weapon, and unfortunate for him, there was somebody that was inside that sanctuary that was able to respond and neutralize him, but only after he killed one security person and then after he killed an usher. Of course, the usher sat there and bled out and died. Okay, and then it looked like the security officer the volunteer security person was probably killed right away. Right? So positioning, he positioned himself in a location to where he had the tactical advantage. So if I'm watching someone and they're hypersensitive or hyper-aware and the positioning doesn't make sense, it's something we pay attention to. It's part of the preventative response, or that part of that prevention. And then that third thing is always going to be their behavior, and it's always going to be the stuff they have with them or belongings. Think about the video of Floyd Lee Corkins. Floyd Lee Corkins walked in with a backpack, which is that odd in itself? Well, based on what we know, probably not. But what was odd was the belonging he had, or the backpack, and then his behavior. What did he do? He bent down and was like trying to get the pistol out, wasn't he? Probably nervous. He never used a pistol to shoot anybody before. And luckily, the security or facility person was able to figure out something was wrong and came around and looked and saw what was happening and was able to stop him. So we're always looking at that hyper-awareness. We're always looking for positioning, and we're always looking for what they have and how they're acting. The client then needs to identify those system weaknesses. We go back up to evaluation. If I understand the threat, if I've got a preventative strategy, I need to continuously find out what my system weaknesses are. Because every physical protection system is going to fail. They're mechanical devices and they're human. As human beings, we are flawed, we're broken, we fail every day. Systems do the same thing. That's why all this takes so much time. There's so many lights, cords, laptops up here just to do one simple hour and 15-minute seminar. Because this stuff can break down at any time. We got to have backup. So any physical protection system, human or electronic, is going to fail. It's prone to failure. And so we always have to go back, and if we're not doing it, we have to convince the client that a vulnerability assessment is continuously done. Okay? Continuous improvement's the last thing. That's for you guys, like doing what you're doing right now, learning more about terrorism, and I hope you have tonight, and also trying to get the client or the customer or that organization to continuously improve what they have in place with physical protection. That is your anti-terrorism strategy for your client. Okay? Questions? Any questions online, Scott? Anything? Folks, any questions? Before I get to you guys, we're going to give some cool stuff away here in just a few minutes, okay? All right? Nothing? Nope, nothing? All right. Hey, folks, hour and 10 minutes of your time. Told you it'd be a lot faster than what we thought. We'd set this up initially for just a group in here, and it's going to take about an hour and a half to hour, 45 minutes. But you don't get any prizes. Sorry, because you couldn't be here with us. We're going to give some prizes away. The guys that came in here to sweat and eat cookies and get fat, so they at least deserve that, and they showed up out here in Antioch, Tennessee. So thanks for being with us. Hey, if you're a protector, you're protecting people, you're protecting organizations, you're protecting facilities, we are thinking about you. If you have any questions whatsoever, please shoot us an email. Please contact us on Facebook at Safe with Man. Get Scott at scottm@michaelmannsecurityservices.com, or you can always contact me at contact@michaelmannsecurityservices.com. Okay? Nothing? All right? And remember, folks, it's about prevention, not response.